The Byzantine Empire lasted for more than 1,000 years, surviving countless wars, political chaos, and cultural shifts. Yet it's often overlooked or misunderstood. But why did this empire rise to become a powerhouse? And how did it eventually collapse in such a dramatic way? The story of Byzantium is not just about ancient history. It's about power, faith, betrayal, and survival, all of which shaped the modern world in ways you might never have guessed. If you think the fall of the Roman Empire was the end of the story, think again. The Eastern Roman Empire, which we now call the Byzantine Empire, picked up where Rome left off. It protected ancient knowledge, influenced religions, and controlled one of the most strategic locations on Earth for centuries. So, how did it rise from the ashes of Rome, and what eventually brought this mighty empire crashing down? From the moment Constantinople was founded, this empire was destined to be special. Sitting on the crossroads between Europe and Asia, it controlled key trade routes and was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and religions. But its story is also a roller coaster filled with brilliant leaders, brutal wars, religious conflicts, and a never-ending struggle to stay alive amid growing enemies. You'll learn about emperors who dreamed big, like Justinian, who tried to rebuild the Roman world. You'll hear about the religious battles that tore Byzantium apart from the inside and the relentless invasions from Persians, Arabs, Turks, and Crusaders. And finally, you'll see how centuries of challenges led to the empire's dramatic fall in 1453. A moment that shook the world and changed history forever. The origins of the Byzantine Empire trace back to the late Roman Empire, when Emperor Diocletian realized the empire was too big and complicated to be ruled by one person alone. So, in 285 AD, he split it into two halves, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. The western half was weak and crumbling, but the eastern half, with its capital at Byzantium, which Emperor Constantine later renamed Constantinople, was wealthy, powerful, and better protected. Constantinople was no ordinary city. Nestled on a peninsula surrounded by water on three sides, it had massive defensive walls that made it nearly impossible to conquer. It was built to be the new Rome, a center of trade, culture, and religion. The city's strategic location allowed it to control land and sea routes between Europe and Asia, making it an economic powerhouse. Unlike the Western Roman Empire, which collapsed under pressure from invading tribes in 476 AD, the Eastern Empire stood strong. It gradually evolved into the Byzantine Empire, a unique civilization blending Roman law and governance, Greek language and culture, and Christian faith. Over time, Byzantium developed its own identity, separate from the old Rome. Religion played a huge role in Byzantine life. Christianity was the empire's official religion, but Byzantium was also home to intense religious debates and power struggles between the emperor and the church. The emperor was not only a political leader but also saw himself as God's representative on earth, which led to conflicts with the Pope and the Western Church. This eventually caused the Great Schism of 1054, splitting Christianity into the Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, a division that still exists today. One of the most famous Byzantine rulers was Emperor Justinian I, who reigned in the 6th century. Justinian was a man on a mission. He wanted to bring back the glory of the old Roman Empire by conquering lost territories and reforming the empire's laws. His armies retook parts of Italy, North Africa, and Spain, trying to reunite the Roman world. Justinian also commissioned the construction of the Hagia Sophia, a massive church in Constantinople that became one of the greatest architectural achievements of its time. Its huge dome and beautiful mosaics made it a symbol of the empire's power and Christian faith. But Justinian's reign wasn't all glory. His wars drained the empire's resources, and his rule faced a massive setback when the plague of Justinian struck in 541 AD. This devastating outbreak killed millions of people, weakening the empire's population and economy. Still, Justinian's legal reforms, called the Justinian Code, had a lasting impact on law in Europe for centuries. After Justinian's death, the empire faced new challenges. The once expansive borders shrank as new enemies appeared. The Persian Empire was a longtime rival, constantly clashing with Byzantium over territories in the east. But a new and more dangerous enemy emerged in the 7th century: the Muslim Arabs. The rapid expansion of Islam shocked the Byzantine world. Arab armies conquered vast regions of Byzantine territory, including Egypt, Syria, and parts of North Africa. Losing these rich provinces was a huge blow to the empire's economy and military strength. In response, Byzantium focused on strengthening its heartland, especially Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. The empire built strong defensive walls and relied on a powerful army that included elite cavalry units called cataphracts. Byzantine generals, like the famous Belisarius, were skilled in both diplomacy and warfare, often using clever strategies to outsmart their enemies. The Byzantine Empire also survived thanks to its incredible fortifications. Constantinople's walls were legendary. When invaders attacked, they often found themselves trapped against these massive stone barriers, unable to break through. The empire's navy was also strong, famously using Greek fire, a mysterious and terrifying weapon that could burn on water, to defeat enemy ships. Byzantium wasn't just a warrior state. It was also a cultural and intellectual hub. Byzantine scholars preserved ancient Greek and Roman texts that might have otherwise been lost to history. They made advances in art, architecture, medicine, and philosophy. Their religious art, especially icons and mosaics, was rich with symbolism and beauty. Yet, despite its strengths, Byzantium was never fully at peace. Internal problems began to weaken the empire. Power struggles within the royal family, corruption, and religious disputes often distracted emperors from ruling effectively. Sometimes, generals or church leaders had more real power than the emperor. In the 11th century, a catastrophic defeat at the Battle of Manzikert in 1071 changed everything. The Seljuk Turks crushed the Byzantine army and took control of much of Anatolia. This was a massive loss because Anatolia was the empire's main source of soldiers and food. With their heartland invaded, Byzantium became desperate. They turned to Western Europe for help, which led to the start of the Crusades, a series of religious wars intended to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim control. But the Crusades didn't always go as planned. In fact, one of the darkest moments in Byzantine history came during the Fourth Crusade in 1204. Instead of fighting Muslims, Crusaders ended up sacking Constantinople itself. The city was pillaged, churches destroyed, and the Byzantine government was overthrown. This event shattered the empire, which split into several smaller states. Although the Byzantines managed to reclaim Constantinople in 1261, the empire never regained its former glory. It was much weaker, poorer, and surrounded by enemies. The Ottomans, a new Turkish power, were rising fast. The Ottomans were organized, fierce warriors who expanded their territory aggressively. Over the next 2 centuries, they gradually chipped away at Byzantine lands. Finally, in 1453, the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II launched a massive siege against Constantinople. Despite fierce resistance, Constantinople fell on May 29, 1453. The empire that had lasted for more than 1,000 years was no more. The fall shocked the Christian world and marked the end of the Middle Ages. But the story didn't end there. Many Greek scholars fled to Western Europe, bringing with them ancient manuscripts and knowledge that helped spark the Renaissance, a rebirth of art, science, and culture that shaped modern Europe. The Ottomans transformed Constantinople into Istanbul, a vibrant capital for their empire that lasted for centuries. Looking back, the rise and fall of the Byzantine Empire teaches us about resilience, change, and the fragile nature of power. It reminds us that empires don't fall overnight. They crumble slowly under the weight of external threats and internal struggles. So if you're fascinated by stories of ancient empires, battles, and intrigue, don't miss the next video coming up now.